Today's question and exploration is, what's the difference between mindful eating and intuitive eating? I get this question a lot, and it surprises people when I say, when you shift how you see mindful eating, you can actually let go of mindful eating. Now, I'm going to give two ways to see mindful eating. The first is how you probably think of mindful eating and how it relates to intuitive eating. So, how most people think about mindful eating is tasting their food. They think about slowing down. They think about being present. And then when they hear intuitive eating, a lot of the times the question comes up, what's the difference between mindful eating, where you savor your food, you go slow, versus intuitive eating? And when you think about mindfulness as just slowing down and tasting your food, that's a fine definition. In a moment, I'll go over kind of a different definition of mindfulness. But when you think about mindfulness as slowing down, and then how that relates to intuitive eating, I say it's like a Russian doll. If you know those Russian dolls where there's a big doll and it's painted and it's smiley, and you crack it in half, and then underneath it there's another doll that's exactly the same looking, same paint, same smile, and then you crack that doll open and there's another smaller one underneath it. Mindful eating is within intuitive eating. Intuitive eating is bigger than just eating your food slowly. It's bigger and more comprehensive than just savoring your food. So that's not to say that mindful eating, when defined as slowing down, savoring your food, being present, is bad. No. I've remember times when I would binge eat mindfully. So I'd eat, I wasn't binge eating, I was emotional eating, because binge eating is defined as mindless, really, really quick eating. But, I knew I was in pain. I knew I was in emotional pain, and I knew I was using food to cope, to manage that emotional pain. So I knew that, and I would eat food. I've done this on meditation retreats. I've done this leading food workshops, teaching how to be mindful with food. And in these circumstances, sometimes a hurt feeling comes up, especially on meditation retreats, when you have so much time to be present with some of your inner energies. Sometimes these inner energies boil up over a meal and you're frustrated and you can tell you just want to use the food to get rid of the feeling, but you're mindful, and that's wonderful. So that's not to take anything away from the first definition of mindfulness. However, the second definition of mindfulness, I think is a bit broader. I'll give you an example. Someone who is using mindful eating in the way I like to teach mindful eating is someone who notices their hunger before the meal. Hunger is a part of eating. Would you agree? You don't eat, ideally, unless you're hungry. 90% of the time, or most times. A person who is mindful of their feelings in their belly then also is mindful as they eat food. The person is then mindful as they fill up. They're mindful of their body as their body devours the food in their stomach, uses it for energy, and starts to get hungry again. The real mindful eater is mindful of this circle, this cycle of hunger, feeding, fullness, hunger, feeding, fullness, hunger, feeding, fullness. That's where we get really powerful results. I've seen people who, when they started studying their food mindfully, and this is the primary difference between this definition of mindfulness, the cycle of mindfulness, versus just eating and savoring your food. Oftentimes when people just eat and savor their food, there's no learning. They're present, they're less stressed, they're focused, and distracted eating is a huge way that people consume extra calories, so there's less distracted eating. The food tastes better, your enjoyment rises. There's tons of benefits by just eating mindfully. But the second definition of mindfulness, where you're including hunger and fullness, the main difference between these is the mindset of learning. When you are studying how food makes you full, when you are studying how hunger affects your appetite, when you're being mindful of these things, it's like you're learning. You are studying your body. There's like, let's say you start to notice cause and effect relationships where if you're hungry, your appetite goes up. If your appetite goes up, it's actually harder, at a certain point, when your appetite is at a certain point of height, it's good. Food tastes good. It actually increases your mindfulness. But as you be mindful of your hunger and you realize your hunger gets really, really high, you realize your mindfulness goes away. That's something you learn when you study your body. That's something that's something that happens when people are seeing mindfulness as a cycle, not just in the moment when they're eating food, but this mindful eating cycle. So one definition of mindfulness is just mindful eating. The second definition is mindful eating cycle, where you study how each step impacts the next steps. The first definition we've already said is different than intuitive eating because intuitive eating is a mindset that involves learning how our culture is programming you to hate your body, to feel ashamed of any extra weight, or how our culture is training you to avoid your emotions, how our culture, a lot of it's cultural. Intuitive eating is understanding how the culture you live in, and that's distinctly different than mindful eating. Intuitive eating also has you respect your body image, has you exercising, or as they like to say, moving your body. So these are all different aspects that aren't really talked about in mindful eating. But the mindful eating cycle of hunger, fullness, enjoying your food, being present and satisfied, and tuning into your body. These 4 things can be said to be 4 of the 10 principles of intuitive eating. So when we think about mindful eating cycle, all of a sudden, we're halfway there to understanding intuitive eating. So I hope this helps you kind of just wrap your head around intuitive eating versus mindful eating and kind of a more comprehensive way of viewing mindful eating. Here's what you can do practically. Get a journal. Write down 4 columns: hunger, eating, fullness, and you write down emotion. You write down, what are you feeling? You want to study your body. You want to be aware of what's going on in your body. At this level of hunger, how much food do I eat? How satisfied and full do I get? And what's my emotional quality? Because you're going to notice that when you bring awareness and you bring awareness to this mindful eating cycle, you're going to notice, holy crap, I am stressed out. My stress is causing me to block my hunger signals for hours at a time, causing me to have irrepressible hunger. And this makes me lose my mindfulness, eat way too much, where I actually feel too full afterwards. Or you might notice that, I'm normal 90% of the time, but then something bad happens. And I just can't stop eating because I feel so sad. You might notice that. You might notice that when you feel stressed, you use food, even if you're not hungry. So mindfulness is just incredibly powerful. It's going to rewire your brain to be more present, focused, and enjoy food more. At the same time, it might rip off a bandage or two, where you get to see some of your anxiety. Are you okay with that? Go slow, 1 step at a time. Don't rush yourself. Notice what comes up. See if you can stay present. Start using food as a gateway to being present. All right. Have a good day.